Welcome to the Prosperous Musician. My name's Spence, and I'm here with a musical guest today. It's Allison Leah, like the princess.
Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. How did you get started in music?
From a really young age, I was always singing and writing music, and I was really involved with theater from my very early childhood onwards. I feel like as I grew into my teenage years, I started really taking an interest in music and going to concerts and live music, and that was always very cathartic for me. And so naturally, I picked up the guitar, started writing music. There was a point when I was probably about 7 years ago in my early college when I kind of realized that there's this world beyond just like playing covers in your bedroom or being selling out stadiums. And that's when I just discovered that there are independent artists and that there's a such thing as independent artist. And of course, in today's day and age, an independent artist is able to get their music out there through social media and just being able to release your music independently and just playing smaller venues and touring and just how it's all really about community. So I really fell in love with that side of it. And I just immediately started kind of just going full speed ahead. I was like, there's this whole world that I've never known about. That was that. I've been pursuing music professionally for about 7 years since, and I'm really fortunate to be able to do it.
And what were your kind of musical inspirations? Because sort of a female vocalist with the guitar, was it that kind of singer-songwriter thing that led you there?
Yeah, this is actually a really interesting like piece of it for me, at least, because my dad he does music professionally, and he's a music and audio engineer. So it's so funny because part of me is like, wow, like my parents really wanted their kids' dreams to be their dreams, but naturally, like me and my siblings are inclined to want to be curious about like the same fields that our parents are in. But the inspirations kind of came from this music that my dad was working on when we were children. So I remember he worked on a lot of singer-songwriters. And so I think for that reason, like some of them are doing well for themselves. And so it was really cool to watch kind of them grow from the career beginnings. And so I think that really inspired me just because I've always been a fan of the song before anything else. I think that was always really appealing to me. So I don't really have the typical answer of like, I grew up on this like Joni Mitchell. I love Joni Mitchell, but I honestly got into her later in college. So it's one of those things where the earliest inspirations were all of these independent songwriters, and that's pretty cool.
So were you kind of all self-taught, or are you kind of trained as a musician or a singer?
I don't want to say like trained because I never really took professional voice lessons, but I was always very heavily involved with musical theater. So I was getting kind of this group training from the point I was probably 8 or 9 years old. And I really loved singing. I was always just at any point that I could sing on a stage, I would. And so it kind of brought in like I took piano lessons and guitar lessons, and I took dance lessons and all of these kind of lessons except for voice lessons. And I don't know why that is. I feel like I always just wanted to do my own thing. And I honestly, I found that with voice lessons, naturally have a very airy head voice that I always really loved. Whenever I was in voice lessons, they would immediately start trying to get me to get rid of that. They would be like, no, like you want to be trained to have like a bright, like it was musical theater, which is a great art form. I love musical theater. I will always love musical theater, but I just naturally didn't have the voice for it. And I was like, once I started recording my own original music and writing songs for my airy head voice, that's when I felt like relief.
Airy head voice, that's the technical name for it.
I'm sure.
I mean, I can hear Alanis Morissette in
Oh.
the way you sing, in the way one of the songs I heard anyway. I can hear that in it. What do you think the influences are in your music?
Well, that's a huge compliment. I love Alanis Morissette. I love artists like a lot. I mean, honestly, a lot of folk pop contemporary artists like Maisie Peters, Maggie Rogers. I mean, Taylor Swift is the obvious songwriting god these days for young women. Chelsea Cutler. I'm listening to a lot of Haim the band. So a lot of like female vocalists that are doing something different. I love Julia Michaels too. Her lyrics are really incredible. So I feel like just, pretty much a strong mix of these like pop contemporary females.
So your songs, are they all based on truth? Are they all based on real things, or is it kind of, are you mixing things up with stories and
I write a lot about everything, but usually the songs that I end up releasing are the ones that are based on truth because they're the ones that I feel the most connected to. So it's funny because I write pretty much my entire life and job right now is just going to rights every day. So, which is so much fun, but I genuinely always feel like the ones that I feel really connected to are the ones that are based on a true story.
so this is full time for you?
Yeah, I'm really fortunate. I started originally was based in New York. I'm from New York City, so I was doing music there for a couple years and just balancing a whole lot of life. And I planned on moving to Nashville March 1st of 2020, which is crazy. I signed my lease March 1st of 2020. Ridiculous in hindsight, but I ended up down here. And then it was kind of one of these moments where every other job that I had was taken away. So I just started focusing on music full time. And I was able to build a community online, both through Patreon, through a lot of really great organizations. And now that I'm able to, kind of do both the online space and the in-person space now, limited of course, but I'm able to play some shows in person. I've been able to do it full time since March 1st of 2020, believe it or not, which is pretty wild when you think about it. And I'm really fortunate.
How are you kind of supporting yourself as a new artist, and also going forward? What is the plan? What is the kind of the goal?
The goal is always just to keep growing, and honestly, like I'm a pretty grassroots kind of person. I worked in the nonprofit space for a little bit before pursuing music full time, so I have that mindset of like just like go out, hit the fields, like just meet people. And I feel like that's really true because once I started meeting people that were relating to my music, that's when I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like I can create a community of people that feel the same way that I do and that like want to rely on music to, or not even rely on music, but that see music as a way to like help, and feel and get these emotions out. And so once I like found this community of people, I've just been like so excited to keep meeting people and honestly, like just take everything day by day, month by month. I mean, right now and I kind of reevaluate, after every year and say like, am I still happy? Am I growing? Am I enjoying what I'm doing? Because the second this doesn't become fun is like, why am I then doing it? But luckily I've been able to just keep meeting people along the way that, I mean, I think like my music and listen on Spotify and then, buy my albums, buy my merch. And I'm excited to keep releasing a new album this year. So then that should be really fun.
So where would you say the most of your income comes from now? Is it online, or is it now a mix of both, or
Oh, it's just a
just
mix of
Spotify?
everything. Yeah, it literally changes by the day, by the month, by the year. I do a lot of, session work as well. I was a jingle singer growing up, so I do a lot of lots of like little interesting piece of my life. And that obviously like stopped during COVID, but it helped me, meet people along the way.
So tell me about your new record that's coming out now.
Yay! I'm really excited about it. It's EP about essentially based in the pandemic, but now veering away from it. So I released a song right at the beginning of the pandemic called "We Can Still Sing," and it was a very much a time capsule of March through May of 2020. And so then when I moved to Nashville I ended up moving in June of 2020. I was like, well, what now? You know, where do we go from here? We're still kind of in this weird space, but we're not like holed up in our houses anymore. Personally, I had a lot of things happen with the pandemic. A lot of people that I know were very deeply affected. As I mentioned, I was literally lived 10 miles from patient zero. I don't know, just like horrible nature of the pandemic. So I'm not like, you know, saying like, okay, I'm using this time to like focus on me, but like obviously it's been 2 years. So you have to kind of figure out this new normal. So when I finally got the ability to move to Nashville, I just started writing. And that's kind of when I was like, well, I'm writing every day. And at this point too, I should mention, like, I have friends that have released songs that I've written with them, and other artists that I've pitched to are now starting to release the music that I've written this year and all of that. So it's just like this wonderful arts community and community of writers. And so I found some really, really wonderful people that I started writing with pretty much every day of 2020. And then that turned into every day of 2021. There are these songs that now have been born from it that are pretty much the linear pattern of the record is every song is about a situation and the way that it affects me and the way that I process the emotions. So the first single off of it was called What I'm Missing, and it came out in July. And this song was about how the pandemic has kind of left me so anxious, but I don't really know where to go. But the only place to go is forward. And it's allowed me to kind of learn all of these things about myself, but it's how do we take them and move on? And then the next single that I released was called 24 Years Down. And it was about turning 24 in a pandemic and kind of reflecting on my life thus far, and every different year seeing it as a vignette. And kind of wondering about where I am to go. So, and then like the next, so it kind of carries on like that. I could go into every single song, but it's this lyrical thread that ties it all together. Whereas the production behind it is very experimental. There's pop, there's folk, there's everything in between. And it's kind of just, again, like, this is how I processed it. Some days were angry and heavy and grief, and some days were really fun and light, and you're just driving around in your car. And so I'm really excited to release it this spring.
So, have you got any advice, any tips for people who may be listening to this and thinking that's what I want to do, but I haven't got the courage, or I'm stuck where I am and I don't know how to do it? What would you say? How would you encourage someone, or what advice would you give to someone who wants to get started in and being like you, like a singer-songwriter?
Biggest advice that I can give is just to kind of say, like, find the music that you want to make, and like the story that you want to share, and the life. Find what speaks to you musically and stick to it. As I continue on along this musical path, there are so many people that want to put their own influences on you and your music. And the earlier you can figure out, like, this is my music, this is the kind of music that I want to write, the stronger you'll become as an artist. Persevere, work really, really hard. I had advice given to me once that was, you always want to be the hardest worker in the room, because you can't out-talent somebody, you can't out-pretty somebody, but you can always outwork somebody. Really taken that to heart over the last probably 5 years. And that's kind of, and I think I have a long way to go. I'm really optimistic and hopeful about my own career, but it's all based in a place of extremely hard work. And I think that that's advice that I will share to anybody that will listen. So.
Allison Leah, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
Hope you have a prosperous launch of your record, and I'll be looking forward to seeing what you do next.
Thank you so much. Likewise, I'm excited to listen.